I'm Jason Farrell, Sky News' Home Editor, and on this Sky News Daily, Lucy Letby has been jailed for the rest of her life for the murder and the attempted murder of babies in her care. Now, before Letby was sentenced, the court heard statements from the victims' parents. The mum of one of the murdered babies, known as Child A, wrote, "Little did we know you were waiting for us to leave so that you could attack the one thing that gave us a reason to carry on in life. Maybe you thought by doing this you would be remembered forever. But I want you to know my family will never think of you again. From this day, you are nothing." Another parent spoke for herself, saying, "My arms, my heart, my life all felt so painfully empty." Lucy Letby wasn't in court to hear any of these statements. She refused to go to the dock to hear the parents directly. A mum said that was one final act of wickedness from a coward. So the question obviously is, should Lucy Letby be forced to come to the dock? The debate about defendants appearing at their sentencing hearing is in the news again. In April, Thomas Cashman didn't go to court when he got 42 years for murdering 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. And Jordan McSweeney wasn't in the dock when he was ordered to serve at least 38 years for murdering Zara Aleena as she walked home in Ilford. Zara's aunt Farah Naz is with us on this episode. The legal commentator Joshua Rozenberg will also join us a bit later. But Farah, thank you for speaking to us. And first of all, can you just give us a little bit of an indication of what the impact is on the family when someone doesn't turn up for sentencing?
Well, it felt like a slap in the face. Here you go, here's another slap in the face. I've killed your loved one, and now I'm not going to stand in the courtroom and face the judgment. I'm not going to stand in the courtroom and hear your victim impact statement. I'm not going to stand in the courtroom and hear what I did. And it felt incomplete, like an incomplete process. The justice process itself felt a little farcical. There's just this huge box. There's this huge empty space in the courtroom where he should have been standing, and there's nobody in it. I wanted him to see us as a family. I wanted him to see our faces. You know, Zara was the last face from our family that he saw. I wanted our anger to be imprinted in his memory.
And I can absolutely see why that is so important. And therefore, you've written this speech to give, and no doubt had to reach into the very depths of your life and your heart to give that speech. And then you're giving it to an empty chair, the person you want to speak to. And I just want to know, how does that feel?
Just made it feel ludicrous, really, pointless, really. That on one hand, we're told as victims that we have a part to play in the judicial system. And of course, it just didn't seem like we did have a part to play on anything, really. And it was just pouring out my heart for what? I don't know. I don't know what it was for.
Jordan McSweeney, he pleaded guilty, so that actually wasn't a court case. This was effectively your chance to have some of this stuff come out. And of course, among that was the CCTV of his acts. And he, or his barrister, said he didn't want to relive the incident. He didn't want to see this CCTV. And that was his reasoning for not turning up. What do you think of that?
He has to relive his actions, doesn't it? It should be imprinted on his brain. He should be forced to watch that footage. We forced ourselves to watch it because we wanted to witness Zara's pain. And that CCTV coverage is imprinted on our brains, what he did to her. And it should be he should be forced to look at that. Look at what you did. He shouldn't be allowed to forget that.
The judge said he had no spine whatsoever. No spine whatsoever. I mean, I'm sure you'll agree with that. Do you think the law should be changed to make people like him, like Jordan McSweeney, like Lucy Letby, turn up and listen to what relatives have to say, to hear what the judge has to say, and to be standing there when the sentence is passed down?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been campaigning for this alongside of Clay Waxman and other families. And I don't think it's the most important thing in the judicial system, because the most important thing was that he got caught, that he got sentenced, he got the right sentencing, and that society is safe from him. And same with Letby. That is the most important thing. And I tried to keep my focus on that. However, I do think that what's happening, this trend of offenders not attending their sentencing, I think this needs attention. It really needs some serious attention, because if they don't attend the sentencing, I think they don't take accountability. There's no full stop. There's no moment of shame. There's no moment of judgment. And this provision that was put in the judicial system in the first place, that the offender doesn't need to be in the courtroom, was there to ensure that legal proceedings could proceed in the absence of an offender. So it was safeguarding the rights of victims in the first place. It was put there so that the proceedings wouldn't have to go on and on and on while waiting for the offender to turn up. So I wouldn't want that to return, because I think it's important that the proceedings are fast for the family's sake, for the victims. But what's happened here, that concession has inadvertently led to a situation where it's exploited, and particularly amongst murderers. What's happening is they're taking power, and actually that shouldn't be permitted.
So straight up, if it meant dragging someone in, kicking and screaming, to the dock to hear the sentencing, would you go for that?
No. I think there was a point that I would have said yes, but I would say don't drag them in, but speak their language. Offenders are told, plead guilty, you'll get 5 years off your tariff. Okay. Don't turn up, you'll get 5 years on your tariff.
Yeah.
It's not, that's not so complicated. Okay. It's not going to happen in the Letby case, but it will happen in a lot of other cases. So why not do that?
Yeah. So it's a crime not to turn up to your sentence. And if you do it, you'll spend more time in prison.
Yes, why not? Why don't we add years to the tariff? Why don't we say when your parole comes up, or you'll never be allowed to apply for parole? Why aren't we saying that? Why aren't we taking the power away from somebody who's taken somebody's life? The whole point about the justice system is life for life.
The trial judge, Mr. Justice Goss KC, was told in advance that Lucy Letby would not be in court for her sentencing, but he said that he had no power to make her attend. And as we've just heard, a number of victims' families from this case and others want this to change. So what are the rules? And could they be changed? Joshua Rozenberg is a legal commentator and joins me now. Joshua, can you just tell us, what's the law on this? Can someone be compelled to turn up for their sentencing?
It's obviously entirely normal for defendants to be in court for sentencing. They're entitled to be there. Normally they want to know what the sentence is going to be. But there has been an increasing trend recently for defendants to choose to remain in the cells, not to come to court. And in those circumstances, there's not much you can do in practice. There's no law that says that you have to be in court. If you choose to remain in the cells, then in practice and as a matter of law, there's not much that can be done about it.
Is that true for any part of the trial? You can just decide not to turn up?
They're normally required to be there for the beginning of the case. But again, if somebody chose not to come up from the cells, the case would proceed in their absence. It's not a good idea. They usually want to know what's going on. They may want to give evidence. But if somebody refused to come to court at any point during the trial, then as a matter of principle, the trial would go ahead in their absence.
There's been this idea of using reasonable force to make someone come and listen to their sentence. What do you think about that?
I can't imagine how that would work in practice. I mean, obviously, you would need to handcuff the defendant, pin their arms behind their back.
Not uncommon.
It's not uncommon when somebody is being transferred from a prison van into court, but it doesn't happen in court itself because it's undignified and might prejudice a jury against a defendant.
I mean, police use reasonable force all the time, don't they? You use reasonable force to get them into a police cell in the first place. So why not use that to get someone as far as a court and then see how they react when they get there?
Because it would disrupt the court. Ultimately, if somebody starts shouting, assuming that they're not gagged, then the court has to tell them to stop shouting, behave themselves. And if they won't, well, what does the court do? The only sanction the court has is to order the defendant to be taken out of court. And so to that extent, the defendant can insist, unless, as I say, you gag somebody, you physically prevent them from speaking. And how does that look?
I mean, set against that, it is an incredible insult, isn't it, to the families? The court case for however many weeks, 36 weeks in this case, has been all about Lucy Letby and whether she's innocent or guilty. And now is the moment when we hear about the victims and the impact that this has had on them. And she chooses not to turn up. And so for that reason, there is an argument, isn't there, that she should be there. She should listen to that. That's what the families want. They want her to hear it, whether it has an impact or not.
I fully accept that. She should certainly be in court. She should listen to the sentence, and that's what almost all defendants do, although recently some of them have been choosing not to. The question is, what do you do if somebody refuses? We've been hearing the impact statements, and they're heartrending from the families who are affected by her murders and attempted murders. They obviously want her to be there because they want her to hear. Well, she will hear, she will know. She's simply not there to be seen. They've seen her in the past. They know what she looks like. They may or may not have some inkling as to her state of mind. But in practice, in a civilized society, we don't drag people into the dock bound and gagged and make them sit there, force them to listen. We maintain a certain dignified approach to criminal justice, even if defendants try to thwart the system. Now, of course, you can punish them if they don't attend court, and that's what the government is proposing. But what sort of punishment do you give somebody who is not only being sentenced to life imprisonment, but is to be given a whole life tariff, which means that she will never be released? 2 years on top of the whole of your life doesn't really make much difference, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I mean, it does feel like it's the kind of last shrill cry of the narcissist, isn't it? That last moment of control that person has.
I think that's very fair. I think that's exactly right. This is her last opportunity to do something of her own volition. From now onwards, she will have no say in where she lives. She may be able to earn certain privileges in prison in due course, but beyond that, just about everything, every aspect of her life will be decided by the state.
I do remember back in 2011, Levi Belfield, I was actually in court when he decided not to turn up for sentencing, when he murdered Millie Dowler. And he had actually, I think, managed to get a message out that the reason he wasn't turning up was he thought the media coverage had been unfair, trying to sort of perhaps send out a signal that he'd had an unfair trial and, you know, maybe everyone had got it wrong. I don't know. Certainly this isn't the first time someone has done this. But is there a danger that somehow the perpetrator can kind of send out their own message, if you like?
Well, I don't know what message Lucy Letby can send out. I think most people will infer that she's a coward, that she's not willing to face up to these appalling crimes. Either that or that she's mentally ill in some way which prevents her from attending, if you're being charitable. We can just form our own conclusions.
There already are calls for changes in the legislation, and politicians will no doubt feel that they need to do something. What would your advice be to them?
They have already said they propose to do something. Now, of course, if you have somebody who is sentenced to a sentence other than life imprisonment, then you can increase their period in custody. If somebody is getting 20 or 30 years, perhaps another couple of years isn't going to make much difference to them. If they're getting a shorter sentence, it might make an impact on them. So you can do that. But if you are going to get a whole life tariff, I do not see what you can do in practice. You can indicate society's contempt for somebody who behaves in this way, but we don't do, what they do in the United States, which is sort of life plus 10 years or life plus 100 years. Life is life, and if you're going to die in prison, there's no practical way in which the state can do this, and I don't see that it really matters. She has sat through her trial. She knows what she has done. Who knows whether she's been able to come to terms with it? Who knows what's going through her mind? She will be told by prison officers and perhaps by her own lawyers what the judge has said. There will be copies which will be published in the newspaper. They will be available online. She will have access to the information. Whether she chooses to read the judge's sentencing remarks later today or next week or next month or next year, they will always be there for her to read. There's no doubt that she knows what's happening in court today. There's no doubt she knows what's going to happen to her, whether she's come to terms with it, whether she can accept it. I can't read her mind. But you don't have to be in court to know what a judge says.
If you'd like to know more about the case against Lucy Letby, you can scroll back in our feed to our last episode, where you can hear from the police who investigated her and family of 2 of the children she attacked. That's it from me. Neil will be back on the next Sky News Daily.